So here I am. I'm sitting next to Felicity Aston, who really is done remarkable things. She skied across Antarctica. She went to the South Pole, and now she's the new godmother for this wonderful ship. We're going to find out about all that and more on Insider Travel Report. Now, Felicity, first of all, it was wonderful to meet you, hear the story, which you thankfully gave a lecture on your accomplishment. But let's talk about that. What led up to you being named godmother of this incredible ship?
Well, I started to have a relationship with Silver Sea. I firstly attended some events that they held at the Royal Geographical Society in London, for example, about Antarctica and the polar regions. And then I joined them for one of their small voyages from London to Ireland, and again was talking about Antarctica and polar stories.
I think I was on that cruise when you went from London.
Under Tower Bridge.
Yes, under Tower. I was on that cruise. Yes, it was wonderful. And that was the ship that was converted into a polar ship for them, Silver Cloud. So that I do remember that. So now you're here.
Yes, and then earlier, just a few months ago, I was contacted and they said, would you consider being godmother for our new expedition ship? And of course, it was a huge honour. There's not many ships, are there? It's not often that you get asked to do such a thing. So I was absolutely thrilled to bits.
Now we're here in Antarctica, and you have some familiarity with this continent. Tell us a little bit about your background here, and also we're going to talk about your feat, which I talked about earlier. But how did you end up in Antarctica to begin with?
Well, my first trip to Antarctica was now more than 20 years ago, which makes me feel very old indeed. But I was posted here as a scientist with the UK's main Antarctic research programme called the British Antarctic Survey. And so I was posted to one of their research stations right at the very bottom of the Antarctic Peninsula. And the extraordinary thing about the setup there was that the standard contract was for 2.5 years. So the idea is that you spent an Antarctic summer, then an Antarctic winter, another Antarctic summer, a second Antarctic winter, and then a third and final Antarctic summer before you went home again. And the idea was that the first summer you're the newbie learning everything, and then the second winter you're the more experienced part of the crew that keeps the station going, and you're advising the people,
the newbies.
Yeah, the newbies, exactly. So you get that sort of consistency, but it meant that I got to know Antarctica in a way that very few have the privilege to do. So I feel very fortunate still for that experience.
Now you've become an author, a scientist, and you really sort of focused all your career on Antarctica. What led to this feat of your first of all, why did you want to do it, to ski to the South Pole?
Yes, well, I'd been putting together polar expeditions by that point, when I think you're referring to the one where I skied across Antarctica alone. Yeah, so I'd skied to the pole with teams, and I'd done several other sort of journeys.
Yeah, but to go alone is a different
story. And at that point I spent 10 years or so, doing these other expeditions in Antarctica. And then the idea of going alone was something different and new, and to me anyway. And I was curious, what would it feel like to be out there by myself? How would I respond to that experience? And could I do it? Was it something that was possible for me? And it also felt like such an amazing sort of homage really to this continent, to be able to cross it from one coast to another, and to do that alone. The simplicity and the completeness of that really spoke to me. So for all of those reasons.
Yeah, well, when your talk though, you said when the plane took off and went into the distance, you sort of started to cry because you're like suddenly realized, I'm here, I'm alone, and that's it. I have to do this, right?
Yeah, I thought I'd prepared really thoroughly for the alone part of the expedition. But in those first few seconds of the journey, when the plane took off and left me behind, I realised that I really wasn't prepared at all for how deeply affecting it was to be so severed from everyone else. And I think now that we've all gone through 3 years of COVID and various sort of lockdowns and isolations, I think people understand much more about how dramatic that moment is when you're separated from everything and everyone. And it's not just a matter of feeling homesick or lonely. It changes the way you behave, it changes the way you make decisions, it changes, everything.
Did you have any contact with the outside world during that? Do you have a radio or something?
Yes, I mean, you're obliged to carry a satellite phone with you when you're in Antarctica under the contract that you have with governments to allow you to be there. So I had a satellite phone, and I was obliged once a day to ring and record my position and basically say I'm still alive. Right. And to start off with, the person on the other end would sort of make small talk, aware that I was on my own. But very quickly, I had to just make it a straightforward transfer of information. I just say, this is Felicity, this is my position, I'm safe and well by, and put the phone down. Because otherwise, this fragile sort of bubble of well-being I created, I was worried to suddenly have that connection with human beings and then for it to be over would be too much for me to take on.
You just focused on the task at hand, right? That was it.
Exactly. I had various coping strategies, and the contact with the outside world began to feel like an intrusion in that little bubble that I'd created for myself. So it was interesting. My psychological response to being alone, I think, was perhaps one of the biggest revelations of that expedition.
And how long did it take you?
I was skiing for 59 days, but I was out there 63, I think, in total. Yeah.
Oh my God. And what was it like when you finally got back to seeing people?
It was, you're at that point, I think I was 34 at the time. So I'd had 34 years of social training. I knew what I was supposed to be doing and what I wasn't. But it felt like there was, a part of me that was up front just going through the motions. And the real me was sat in the back of my head somewhere, just kind of mulling over what had just happened, almost sort of in shock or something like that. And it took a long while, maybe 6 months or more, before I felt like those two parts of me were back together again and I was fully present. Because before that, it was like I was just sat in the back of my mind, mulling everything over while I was letting, this other sort of front person just go through the motions. But
well, it was an amazing accomplishment, and clearly, I know you said in your lecture, if there's somebody tells you can't do something, you do it, and that's clearly something that you did. Now, compare that experience. Here you are in Silversea, and you're back in the Antarctic. A little bit different, I would think, right?
Ah, yes. I mean, I've probably made my visits to Antarctica as difficult as I possibly could for myself, but this is the total reverse of that. I mean, it's a super beautiful, luxurious ship, and there's joy in that too. I get to enjoy the landscape outside of the windows without having to worry about...
And take your son, your family, the whole thing.
My little boy is with us, so he's 5 years old, and this is his first visit to Antarctica. And for me to be able to show my child a place that means so much to me and has taken up so much of my adult life, it's really...
You're starting him in on a little bit of a high note here compared to what you went through. It's like he's going to be, you think, is this the way everybody travels?
Yeah, he's going to be expecting a butler when he goes on expedition.
That's what every expedition should have a butler, right?
Do you know what? Maybe that's going to be my tradition from now on. I will bring a butler along.
That's wonderful. Now let's talk about so this has been a great experience for you, and we're going to you're now, this is your ship. Did you know that?
Well, no.
You're the godmother. You can do what you want with it. It's it. Once you've blessed it, it's it. Now, and in fact, we were going to talk a little bit about what is next for you now. I mean, what are you doing right now in terms of your focus?
Yeah, well, my focus has been to the North Pole for the last few years because the environment up there is changing so rapidly that the window of opportunity that we have to make expeditions in that part of the world is closing very rapidly. And my expeditions are now based on collecting samples and collecting as much data as possible, because very soon we won't be able to go up there on skis, and getting that data will become even more difficult and more expensive. So we're due to go out in April, which is really the only window in the year that you have to get right up to those high northern latitudes. And I have a small team of 6, and we're going out to collect snow, ice and water samples for later analysis.
So you switched from the South Pole to the North Pole officially, right?
Yeah, I'm bipolar. Antarctica is where my heart is, I feel, but I live in the Arctic, and it's also a place where I feel very comfortable and have endless curiosity.
This ship goes up there too.
It does, yes, yeah.
So I think you might want to schedule a cruise on her. And I just saw Conrad Coburn, who's the expedition head for Silversea, has some marvelous cruises of Hudson Bay and above.
Yeah, they've got big plans, and I'm very jealous. Some of these voyages that they're planning are, to parts of the world where just even a few years ago you wouldn't have even dreamt that we'd be able to go and visit, never mind in luxury and with facilities like this. We have microscopes, we have kayaks, we have these incredible zodiacs where we can go and explore.
A lot of these expedition ships now have full science centers, and they sponsor teams, and it's a little bit different from your old stations down here. So now you have this ship going up to the Arctic, and you could try it. It's really amazing what this new breed of polar expedition ship is doing. This is a great one. I've been on a few more, and it really is the whole part of this market has exploded. And I mean, you were the pioneers in this, getting everybody interested in coming down here.
Well, I think it's part of the reason why I was so pleased to be working with Silversea, because they are a company that has recognized that right now people need to justify why they're traveling, and you need to make sure that you're traveling in a way that is responsible and that has integrity and purpose. Otherwise, it's no longer, you can't float around these fragile environments without being absolutely sure that not only are you not damaging anything while you're here, but that you're taking home something of value that will make things better in some way in the future. And Silversea, as you know, is a company that really is very mindful of what can we do better, constantly improving, and setting themselves really ambitious goals for how the future of travel will look like. And I think that's very important, because the other option is to ban travel in places like this altogether, and I can't see that that's a good thing. The science programs, the nationally funded science programs, have had Antarctica more or less to themselves for a long time, and I think that in order to solve the problems that we need to solve, it needs to involve everybody, and bringing as many people as possible to come and see these places in a responsible manner can have huge benefits. And I think that's just doing it in a way that is responsible and constantly bettering ourselves. That's surely the way forward.
I totally agree. I mean, we have to understand these areas that we go to. It's incredible to go to Antarctica, incredible to go to the Arctic, but we have to do it responsibly, and so we can understand what we can do for the future. Well, first of all, congratulations on being the godmother of this one ship. And I don't think I told you earlier, this is your ship. That means you get at least, my understanding is, you get at least one free cruise every year.
Oh, is that right?
So you should talk to them about that, because it doesn't have to be here. It could be now your new focus is in Arctic. I mean, if you thought this is a nice way to go to Antarctica, it's probably a nice way to go to the Arctic as well, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe they can pass by my home up in Iceland, pick me up on the way. That would be great, wouldn't it?
I think that's perfectly possible. I think they do stop there, then they go Greenland, Hudson Bay, all these areas. So, hey, why not for next summer?
Go have a chat right now.
I think go walk down the hall. I know the whole team is down there, and say, look, I hear somebody told me that part of this deal is I can have the ship once a year. So there you go.
Wow. Well, I didn't know that. So I shall definitely, go and seek further information.
Well, again, congratulations. And it's been wonderful to meet you and hear all about your adventures here in the White Continent. And now to hear about what you're doing up in the North Pole. And again, we're looking forward to the christening. I think it's tomorrow or the next day.
Yes. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. It sounds like a big adventure in its own right.
You know, I think this particular one, I think the bottle is made of ice. And so whatever, I don't know if they're going to, you don't have to hold it. I think it crashes against the ship. So it is a marvelous ceremony, and I think you'll enjoy it. But we've been kind of celebrating this whole time.
Yeah, it has. It's a 3-part ceremony, as we discovered. They had the blessing, and then we had the ceremony in Puerto Williams, and now this is the final bit, the actual christening of the ship. And you know, how many times in your life you're going to have the opportunity to say those famous words and set that bottle off towards a hull? So I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, we're looking forward to it as well. Again, congratulations, and it was lovely to meet you and also be here in Antarctica, which you know so well. Again, I'm James Shillinglaw, and this is Insider Travel Report.